Cheers, my friends. Welcome back to the train wreck we call Pour Judgement, a show where a group of us lovable idiots get together and find the absolute best wine, beer, and spirits at everyday great value prices. I'm Daniel Rutter, and I'm joined by my good friend.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
On our last episode of Pour Judgement, we got together and we reviewed and rated 3 California blonde ales. So it made sense when a new study came out talking about the financial impact of the beer industry on the world economy. We thought it would be a good idea to get together, talk about the results, and share a little bit of that information with you. Before we get into it, no self-respecting show that claims to be centered around alcohol would record an episode without drinking something delicious. So, Mike, what are we drinking today?
Well, we brought a can of Figueroa Mountains Hoppy Poppy IPA. It's an IPA that's supposed to be reminiscent of California's poppy fields, and that's brewed in Buellton, California, just at the south end of California's beautiful Central Coast.
Love that area. We also have the Common Space Food Fight Hazy IPA from local brewer in LA. Gives us a little bit of pineapple and guava, and also another delicious IPA. And then our delicious dark beer here is a Deschutes Black Butte Porter from Bend, Oregon. All right, cheers, Mike.
Cheers.
All right. And if you're enjoying our show, we'd really appreciate it if you would share, like, and subscribe. But with that said, let's get into the show. So the World Brewing Alliance commissioned Oxford Economics to explore the total global economic contribution of the beer industry on the world's economy. The results of this study were just recently released, so we will be presenting you with the highlights. Mike, will you take us through a few of those key findings?
Sure. The study was conducted in 185 countries, and it's the largest of its kind. The study estimates that the beer industry contributed $878 billion US to the global GDP in 2023. That's almost $1 trillion. And that equates to almost 1% of the entire global economy. The study found that the beer industry had a multiplier of 9x, which means that every $1 million in GDP that's generated by beer production directly generates an additional 8 million through supply chains, upstream, downstream, sales, hospitality, restaurants, wages, that sort of stuff. Beer itself generates about $376 billion in tax revenue worldwide.
Which is what the government really cares about. They want their money, and beer is contributing to that.
The study found that the big countries that contribute to the GDP contribution are U.S., China, Germany, Brazil, U.K., Japan, and Mexico. And those countries account for about 56% of the beer sector's GDP contribution. The biggest two economies are, of course, the U.S. and China, and they've got the largest contribution to the beer sector. But interestingly, Brazil and Mexico saw some really, really strong growth in their markets. And in those economies, Brazil beer accounts for about 1.5% of the GDP, and Mexico, it's about 1.3% of the GDP. I think that's largely driven by strong domestic consumption. In Mexico, they drink about 101 liters per capita of beer. That's 26.7 gallons of beer per person per year.
You know, I was thinking about that, because said another way, 101 liters is basically a 2-liter bottle of beer drank every week per person in all of Mexico. And when you really think about that, because I did a little digging and I looked it up, and the CIA fact book says there's about 130 million people. The population of Mexico is about 130 million people. And about a quarter of that is aged 14 and below, which means there's another percentage that's 15 up to the legal drinking age of 18 that in theory isn't drinking. So then you've got the rest of the population plus the non-beer drinkers, the older people that maybe aren't drinking less, and that are just a group of people that are really getting into it. And I appreciate that.
Well, I think we need to do an episode where we're sampling various Mexican lagers, right? There's a lot of really great beers.
Yeah.
And on a hot day like this, They're really easy to drink, and they don't weigh you down as much as some of these heavier porters and stuff would.
That's certainly true, and it doesn't shock me, the top 7, producers, consumers, but it's what I expected. But then hearing just how much they're contributing, it kind of surprised me, and that's a lot of great countries that we can dig into and see what they're offering.
I am looking forward to it. Brazil was also not far behind. They drink about 84 liters per capita in Brazil, which is 22 gallons, just above that, which is still a lot of beer per person per year. And I got to tell you, I'm not as familiar with a lot of the Brazilian beers.
Not at all. Yeah, would love to try some of those.
The beer industry supports about 33 million jobs globally, which again is about 1% of jobs around the world. And one really interesting finding of the study, just as we were talking about, is that the beer production is largely a local affair, where almost 90%, 86% of the brewer supplies were purchased from businesses within that same country. And so it means that breweries are really relying on local suppliers, local farmers, and local partners for both their upstream and downstream supply and customers.
Yeah, that was a big point that the study kept referring back to, is just how much they're contributing to the local economy, and how much everyone around them within the local economy is contributing back to them and really supporting the business. And we'll be including the study in our show notes, so if you click on the link, it'll take you to the website. There's some great infographics on it, which you'll be seeing, or you've been seeing as we talk through this. But thank you, Mike. So kind of going from that big global, and let's keep it kind of coming back to the local. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the U.S. Beer industry itself, and this information is really coming out of the Brewers Association, their 2024 year in review, which they did back in December. And the beer industry, have really seen some good growth years, but the last couple of years it's been on the decline, and so it's been, feeling harder times, and so, total overall beer industry declined 5.1% year over year in 2023, while craft beer, it was still a decline, but they only fell 1%, so not quite as hit as hard. But unfortunately, as the 2024 data begins to come in, it does look like it's going to be about a decline of 2% in 2024. Though
there's just a lot more options now too, right? The hard seltzer, you're seeing a lot more of that. You're seeing a lot of the the tequila-based drinks, ranch waters, things like that.
Yeah, it's really tequila. Everyone keeps talking about how tequila is.
It's the new bourbon.
It's
perfect. Well, I think I know what our next episode needs to be.
Oh, yeah, I could agree with that. And interestingly, I also saw, the category of non-alcoholic beers. That one keeps coming up too, as just being a big growth sector, as, people start to look at ways of maybe, consuming a little less alcohol, but they want the taste. And so non-alcoholic beer was booming with a 30% sales growth year over year.
Wow.
So also, unfortunately,
we won't be doing those.
I don't know. It might be interesting.
Maybe less interesting.
Or what could be really interesting about that is doing a non-alcoholic side by side, or blind taste it against an alcoholic beer, and can we pick it out? Because as we showed at our last episode, we are really good at picking out the beer.
Well, Tarek was.
One of us was. The rest of us were sheep and just agreed with each other. So also, unfortunately, 2024 also saw a net decline in just small and independent breweries in 2024, dropping down to 9,736 by the end of the year, which was, while in a good way, 335 new breweries opened, 399 breweries closed. So there was a net decline, unfortunately. But, with a little bit of, the smallest amount of, sunshine, craft brewing contributed $77.1 billion to the U.S. economy and supported 460,000 jobs nationwide, which is pretty significant. And again, kind of getting into that, the overall beer industry has been struggling, but it looks like craft beer is not getting hit quite as hard, where, when you look at in terms of market share, craft beer has been increasing, which it hit 13.6% in 2023, up from 12.3% in 2020.
And they're the ones that are probably locally sourcing a lot of their stuff.
That's
right? And also locally supplying, right? I mean, it just makes sense.
It does, and that's kind of, not that I've got anything against the big guys, but when you want to see people succeeding, you look at the brewery down the street from you, and that's who we're visiting on the weekly basis.
And we've seen just in this past year, we've seen a couple of our favorites have to close down. So
Yeah.
we're seeing it here.
Yeah, unfortunately. Excuse me while I take a sip of that delicious food fight, which I like. That's really good.
Yeah. No, it's-
So all of that information, you'll find. We've also linked the Brewers Association Year in Review, and we put a link to it in our show notes. Also, as we started talking about doing this episode, we did put together a survey to explore beer preferences and beer drinking habits. So if you click into the show notes, we have a survey for you. We'd love it if you would all jump in and take it. It won't take much of your time. And if we get enough viewers to take the survey and we get enough respondents, we'll go ahead and do a future show where we talk about the results. So again, we'd appreciate it if you participated. And as always, we appreciate you watching our show, and we would love it if you shared it, you liked it, and you subscribed to it. Any thoughts? Final thoughts, I should say?
No, other than of these three choices that we're making today, again, I would say they are all very, very good. I got to say, this I'm not familiar with the Common Space Brewery nor the Figueroa Mountain one, but they're both really good choices. This one is a favorite of ours. We've enjoyed the Deschutes for a long time, but these two are good entries, good new entries.
Yeah, they are, and very different beers. That IPAs are much closer to each other, but to compare that against the Deschutes, it's definitely very different flavor profile, but
Yes.
They're all tasting very good.
Deschutes very chocolatey.
It's so chocolate, a little coffee in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the others are fruity, hoppy, just a nice mix.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us for this brief episode. We shared some facts with you. We've given you our opinions, but don't take our word for it because we have poor judgment.